What made the teacher's pet fight with the teacher? Naomi stood up and threw her textbook at Mr. Huang, screaming, "You know what you did!" Huang immediately put his hands up in a calming gesture and told her, "Naomi, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please, let's discuss this calmly." He even took a step toward her like a worried parent. She backed away and grabbed her laptop and started pulling up something on the screen, while Mr. Huang kept that confused but caring expression. "Whatever you think happened, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding." Security arrived and escorted Naomi out while she kept yelling about evidence and lies. Mr. Huang handled it perfectly. Told the class he was worried about Naomi's stress levels. Mentioned she'd been pushing herself too hard for college applications. Even said he'd check in with the guidance counselor about getting her support. Poor kid must have snapped from the pressure. Let's take 5 minutes before we continue. The performance was flawless, but everyone knew this was BS. By lunch, everyone was talking about how Naomi had lost it and attacked poor Mr. Huang for no reason. He played the victim perfectly when administration came to interview him. Expressed nothing but concern for Naomi's mental health. Even offered to write a statement supporting leniency. Naomi got suspended for 3 days. When she came back, she was different. Quieter. She transferred out of his class, but Naomi wasn't backing down. She started documenting everything. Taking photos of him in the parking lot. Recording conversations when she passed him in the halls. People started calling her obsessed and creepy. Mr. Huang filed an incident report about feeling stalked, which made Naomi look even more unstable. "I'm genuinely concerned about her fixation on me." He told the principal loud enough for others to hear. Maybe she developed some confusion about our student-teacher relationship. The way he phrased it planted seeds. Made people wonder if Naomi had a crush that got rejected. He never said it directly, but the implications spread through gossip. Poor Mr. Huang dealing with an unbalanced student who couldn't handle rejection. Naomi tried showing people evidence on her phone, but Mr. Huang had prepared for that too. He'd already told administration she might fabricate things because of her delusions. When she produced screenshots, he suggested they could be doctored. When she had recordings, he questioned their context and authenticity. Mental health issues can cause people to misinterpret innocent interactions. He'd say it so sadly, like his heart was breaking for her. The genius was how he isolated her. Other teachers started treating her like a problem. Students avoided her because they didn't want to get involved in drama. Even her friends distanced themselves because the whole situation was too messy, and their college recommendations were at stake. I watched it happen over 2 months. Naomi getting more desperate as Mr. Huang got more sympathetic. He'd do these little performances where he'd look hurt when she was nearby. Made sure people saw him being extra kind to other students like he was bravely continuing despite the harassment. But Naomi kept fighting. Started missing classes to gather more evidence. Her grades slipped, which Mr. Huang used as proof of her declining mental state. He even suggested to her parents that she might need professional help during a conference he requested out of concern. The breaking point came when Naomi's mom withdrew her from school. Not because she believed her daughter, but because the situation was affecting college prospects. Naomi tried one last time to get someone to look at her evidence, but nobody wanted to risk their own relationship with a beloved teacher. Mr. Huang won. Completely. By graduation, everyone remembered Naomi as the girl who went crazy and attacked a teacher. He gave a speech about resilience and compassion that got a standing ovation, but no one knew that Naomi wasn't going down without a fight. I saw Naomi once more at a coffee shop near the community college. She looked exhausted but still had that laptop. Still collecting something. She recognized me and came over with this intense look. She asked if I wanted to know the truth about what he'd really done. "Please, just look at one thing." She opened a folder on her screen. "Then you'll understand why I had to try to stop him." I stare at the laptop screen while Naomi hovers over a folder labeled meetings/grades/CCTV logs. Part of me wants to walk away and pretend this conversation never happened. I keep thinking about how everyone turned on her. How she became the crazy girl who attacked a teacher. I take a breath and nod for her to open it. Naomi clicks the folder and a color-coded timeline fills the screen. It shows dates and times and brief descriptions going back 2 years. Each entry has tags like letter meeting and late email and grade change and hallway encounter. The sheer amount of documentation makes my stomach drop. This isn't the work of someone who snapped from stress. This is careful and organized and detailed. She scrolls to entries from last fall when I remember her seeming happy and engaged in Mr. Huang's class. The timeline shows her grades jumping from B+ to A after something called college rec discussion, his classroom, after hours. I remember how Mr. Huang would praise certain students for their dedication. How special it felt when he noticed you. How he'd say you had real potential and he wanted to help you succeed. Naomi pulls up a spreadsheet comparing her assignment grades before and after these private meetings. The pattern is clear. Every meeting came before a grade boost. The meetings became more frequent as college application season got closer. She points to timestamps showing emails sent at 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. and even 3 a.m. The subject lines say things like checking in and mentorship and wanted to see how you're doing. My hands feel cold as I realize I'd dismissed her accusations because Mr. Huang seemed so genuinely concerned about her mental health. Naomi plays a short audio clip of Mr. Huang talking to her in the hallway. His voice is casual and warm. He asks about her weekend plans. Then she plays his interview with administration where that same voice sounds completely different. It drips with worried concern as he suggests she's confused about our relationship. The shift between those two recordings makes my skin crawl because I've heard both versions of Mr. Huang. I remember how he'd be buddy-like with students in the hallway. Then he'd switch to professional and concerned when adults were around. Naomi watches my face and I can see she's been waiting months for someone to have this exact reaction. I want to believe her, but I'm scared of what helping her would cost me. My college recommendations aren't written yet. Mr. Huang teaches 2 of my classes. Everyone already thinks Naomi is obsessed and unstable. If I take her side, I'll become the girl who believed the crazy accusations. But sitting here looking at her evidence, I can't pretend this is nothing. I tell Naomi I'll help her verify what she's collected, but I can't promise to take sides publicly yet. She nods like she expected that answer. She says verification is all she needs right now. We agree to meet again after I've had time to look through everything she's documented, after I figure out what can actually be proven. That evening, Naomi emails me a read-only link to her full evidence folder. She includes instructions on how to check file metadata and export timestamps. The folder contains hundreds of files organized by date and type, screenshots and audio recordings and photos of her grade portal, even parking lot timestamps matched up with his office hours. This isn't obsession. This is a careful investigation. The next morning, I message Ivy Gray. She's a journalist who graduated from our school 3 years ago. She covers local education stories now. I phrase it carefully and say I have a friend who documented concerning teacher behavior. I say she needs advice on how to verify digital evidence. Ivy responds within an hour asking to meet for coffee. I meet Ivy at a coffee shop downtown 2 days later. She brings a laptop and a notepad and gets straight to business. She explains she needs at least 2 independent sources before she could write anything. One person's documentation is never enough, no matter how detailed. She opens her laptop and shows me how to check photo EXIF data. She pulls up a random image and right-clicks to view properties. The metadata shows when the photo was taken, what device captured it, even GPS coordinates sometimes. She teaches me how to check if timestamps have been changed or if files have been edited. Then she switches to email headers. She opens her own inbox and clicks through menus to show me the full header information that proves where an email came from and when it was really sent. The technical details make my head spin, but I take notes on everything. She warns me that people can fake screenshots easily, but original files with intact metadata are harder to manipulate. The verification standards feel impossibly high, but I understand why they exist. Without this level of proof, anyone could make accusations based on doctored evidence. I spend the next 2 days going through my own social media posts and photo library. I scroll back through Instagram and Facebook looking for anything that might match Naomi's timeline. Most of my photos are useless selfies and food pictures. Then I find one from the library last October. I posted it to show how late I was studying for midterms. The photo shows my laptop and textbooks spread across a table. In the background, through the library windows, you can see part of the school building. I zoom in and notice lights on in what I'm pretty sure is Mr. Huang's classroom. The timestamp on the photo says 8:15 p.m. on a Saturday. I pull up Naomi's timeline and search for that date. She has an entry that says letter meeting his classroom 8 to 9 p.m. Saturday. The match makes my hands shake. It's circumstantial, but it aligns perfectly with what she documented. I keep digging through old photos. The yearbook committee posted candid shots throughout the year on their shared drive. I download the entire folder and start scrolling through hundreds of images. Most show students at lunch or in the hallways between classes. Then I spot Naomi in one shot. She's standing outside Mr. Huang's classroom during what should have been her free period. He's visible through the doorway, gesturing animatedly while she stands there with her arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. The photo metadata shows it was taken in late September. I check her timeline and find an entry from that same week that says, pressure about recommendation letter felt trapped. I'd never noticed the tension in her posture before. In the photo, she's not smiling or engaged like you'd expect from a student excited about college planning. She looks cornered. I start drafting notes in a private document about what I've verified so far. I list the library photo timestamp match and the yearbook candid that corroborates her timeline entry. My anxiety spikes every time I imagine actually doing something with this information. If I contact school staff about this, I become part of the story. If I stay silent, I'm protecting a system that failed Naomi. There's no neutral option anymore. Either I help verify her evidence and risk my own college prospects, or I pretend I never saw any of this. But I can't unsee the patterns now. The timestamps align too perfectly. The photos show exactly what she described. I save my notes and close my laptop feeling sick. Naomi sends me a scanned journal entry that evening. The file name says September last year before everything exploded publicly. I open it and see her handwriting filling lined notebook pages. She describes the day she threw the textbook at Mr. Huang. She writes about spending the previous night reviewing all her documentation and finally seeing the full pattern of boundary violations. She lists specific incidents going back 18 months, private meetings that lasted longer than necessary, comments about her appearance disguised as compliments, questions about her personal life that felt intrusive. The entry explains she didn't snap from stress. She snapped from finally naming what had been happening to her. She writes that she knew throwing the textbook would make her look unstable, but she needed to force the situation into the open. She couldn't keep pretending the mentorship was normal anymore. The journal continues with more details about how Mr. De Huang would frame their private meetings. He called it mentorship and said he wanted to help her reach her potential. But during these meetings, he'd ask personal questions about her home life and relationships and future plans. He'd position himself as the only teacher who really understood her. The language was never overtly inappropriate, but it created this sense of special obligation. Like she owed him access to her private thoughts because he was investing so much time in her success. He'd mention how many students would love this kind of attention. How lucky she was that he saw something special in her. The journal captures how isolated these interactions made her feel. She couldn't explain to friends why the meetings felt wrong, when on the surface they looked like normal teacher support. Another section describes her first attempt to report concerns to Gabriella Kwan, the guidance counselor. Naomi writes that Kwan listened politely while she tried to explain how uncomfortable the meetings made her feel. But Kwan kept reframing everything as Naomi misunderstanding normal teacher investment. She suggested Naomi was stressed about college applications, and maybe interpreting friendly concern as something else. The journal entry captures Naomi's confusion about whether she was overreacting or being gaslit. Kwan never asked for specific examples or offered to look into the situation. She just suggested Naomi focus on her studies and try to appreciate the support Mr. Kwong was offering. The entry ends with Naomi questioning her own judgment and wondering if she was imagining problems that didn't exist. I request a meeting with Gabriella Kwan the next week using the excuse that I need college planning advice. She schedules me during her office hours and greets me with a professional smile. She asks about my interests and timeline for applications. I give vague answers about still exploring options. Then I carefully mention that I've heard some students feel uncomfortable with how much personal information teachers request during recommendation meetings. Kwan's smile doesn't change, but something shifts in her eyes. She gives me a practiced response about how healthy boundaries are always important, but most teachers just want to help students succeed. She says teacher investment in student futures is actually a good thing, and students sometimes misinterpret caring concern. The conversation feels like she's reading from a script. When I try to ask more specific questions, she redirects back to my own college plans. The meeting ends with her suggesting I focus on my applications, rather than worrying about other students' experiences. I try to schedule a brief meeting with Principal Reed Westbrook to discuss student privacy concerns in general terms. I email his office asking for 15 minutes to talk about school policies. His assistant responds within hours, redirecting me to proper channels. The email says I should discuss any concerns with my guidance counselor first. If I still have questions after that, I can submit a formal written request that will be reviewed. The bureaucratic runaround feels designed to exhaust anyone who tries to raise concerns. Multiple layers of gatekeepers before you can reach someone with actual authority. By the time you navigate all the proper channels, you're too tired to keep pushing. Ivy schedules a video call with Naomi and me to go over evidence handling. She shares her screen and walks us through how to properly export emails with full headers visible. She shows us which settings to use in different email clients to preserve all the metadata. Then she demonstrates how to transfer photos without stripping EXIF data. She emphasizes that we need to maintain a clear chain of custody for any evidence. Every time we copy or move a file, we should document when and how we did it. The process feels overwhelming, but Ivy's calm professionalism makes it seem possible. She reminds us that we're building something that needs to withstand scrutiny from people who want to discredit it. Every technical detail matters because one mistake could let someone dismiss the entire case as fabricated. Naomi spends the next 2 days filling out the FERPA request form, triple-checking every field before she submits it to the district office. She emails me a copy showing the timestamp and confirmation number. The form asks for all email communications between her and school staff from her student account for the past 3 years. She texts me that night saying she's worried the request will tip off administration that she's still building a case. But we need those original files from the school's email servers to prove nothing was doctored. The district has 30 days to respond according to federal law. I start planning my approach to Celine Benson, the young English teacher everyone says is nice and approachable. I wait until after her class on Wednesday when most students have cleared out. I walk up to her desk and ask if I can talk to her about something for a minute. She looks up from grading papers and smiles, telling me of course. I ask if teachers get training on appropriate boundaries with students. Her smile stays, but something shifts in her eyes. She sets down her pen and says the training is pretty basic, mostly focused on obvious stuff like don't be alone with students behind closed doors or exchange personal contact info. I mention casually that some teachers seem to have a lot of private meetings with students, and I'm wondering if that's normal. Celine's expression changes completely. She glances at the open classroom door and her voice gets quieter. She says she's noticed that too, and it makes her uncomfortable sometimes. But before she can say more, another student walks in asking about an assignment. Celine tells me we can talk more later if I want. The next day after class, she asks me to stay behind. She gets up and closes the classroom door, which makes me nervous because that's exactly what we were just discussing. Celine sits on the edge of her desk and says what she's about to tell me is completely off the record. She admits that she's seen certain teachers develop really intense relationships with high-achieving students that cross lines she's not comfortable with. She won't say names, but describes the pattern of special meetings, personal conversations, and favoritism that looks like more than normal teaching. I ask why she hasn't reported it. Celine looks at the floor and says she's still untenured and needs good reviews from administration to keep her job. If she makes waves about a popular teacher, she's worried it'll hurt her career before it even starts. She tells me to be careful about who I trust, and says some teachers protect each other no matter what. That evening, I get a message on Instagram from someone named Mason McPherson. I don't recognize the name at first. He says he heard through friends that someone is looking into Mr. Huang's mentorship stuff, and asks if we can talk somewhere private. My hands shake as I type back asking how he heard about this. Mason says word travels and he graduated 2 years ago, but he has information that might help. We agree to meet at the park near school the next afternoon. I immediately call Naomi and tell her about Mason. She goes quiet for a long time and then says this means other people experienced what she did. Her voice sounds different, like she's trying not to cry. She says she always wondered if there were others but couldn't find anyone willing to talk. Later that night, Naomi calls me from the community college library. She sounds completely exhausted. She tells me she's juggling 3 classes. working part-time at a coffee shop and spending every spare minute on this investigation. She admits there are days she wants to give up because the emotional cost is brutal, and she's not sure anything will actually change. But then she thinks about other students who might be going through what she experienced right now, and she forces herself to keep documenting. She says if she stops, she'll never forgive herself for not trying. I meet Mason at the park the next day. He's tall and nervous, checking around like he's worried someone will see us. He pulls out his phone and shows me saved emails from his junior year when Mr. Huang was his college advisor. I read through them and my stomach twists. The tone is exactly like Naomi's emails. Overly friendly and personal. Lots of late-night messages, offers of special help, questions about his family and personal life. Mason scrolls to a photo of a handwritten note from Mr. Huang, thanking him for trusting me with your story during a difficult time. The note feels way too personal for a teacher-student relationship. Mason tells me he's scared to be publicly identified because he's applying to law schools and can't risk his reputation. But he wanted someone to know his experience was real and that Naomi wasn't making things up. He asks me not to use his name without permission. I promise I won't. Mason gives me permission to screenshot the emails and photograph the note for our records. He says if it comes to legal action, he might be willing to provide a statement, but he needs time to think about it. I thank him and watch him walk away looking over his shoulder. I send everything to Ivy and Naomi immediately. Ivy responds an hour later saying this is important corroboration, but she needs to see the original email files with full headers, not just screenshots. She explains that for anything she publishes, she needs independent verification from multiple sources with original unedited files. The standards feel impossible, but I understand we're trying to build something that can survive people trying to tear it apart. Naomi works with Ivy over video chat to properly export her original emails from her student account. Ivy walks her through the technical steps to preserve all the metadata and header information. 2 days later, Naomi sends me the exported files. The metadata shows every message was sent from Mr. Huang's official school email address at the exact timestamp she documented. Several emails were sent by him late at night, not responses to student questions, but him initiating conversations. The headers prove these came directly from the district's mail server. They're not fabricated or edited. This is real evidence from the school's own system. The next morning, a classmate I barely know corners me in the hallway before first period. She's in my calculus class, but we've never really talked. She tells me she heard I've been helping Naomi with her crusade against Mr. Huang. Her voice is friendly, but her eyes aren't. She says teachers are already talking about who's stirring up trouble and causing problems. She suggests I think about my own future and my college applications. She reminds me that I still need recommendation letters and good relationships with staff. The thread is wrapped up like friendly advice, but it makes me feel cold all over. I don't respond, just walk away, but I can't stop thinking about it all through class. After school, Mr. Huang catches me in the hallway outside his classroom. He has that concerned parent look on his face, the one that used to make me feel special and noticed. He mentions he's heard I've been spending time with Naomi lately. He says he's worried about me getting pulled into her unhealthy obsession with him. He takes a small step closer and his voice gets softer. He tells me that whatever Naomi has told me is likely distorted by her mental health struggles. He says he understands she's convinced herself something inappropriate happened, but that's part of her condition. He touches my shoulder briefly and says he'd hate to see another bright student get caught up in false narratives that could damage their future. Every word sounds caring and protective, but I feel like I'm being warned. I tell him I need to get to my next class and walk away quickly. My legs feel shaky and I understand exactly what Naomi meant about his manipulation tactics. He never said anything directly threatening, but the message was crystal clear. I walk straight to my car and drive home with my hands gripping the wheel too tight. My mom is at work, so I go to my room and open my laptop and start typing everything that just happened. I write down Mr. Huang's exact words about being worried I was getting pulled into Naomi's unhealthy obsession. I describe how he stepped closer when he said it, and how his voice got softer like he was sharing a secret. I note the time it happened and where we were standing, and how he touched my shoulder for just a second before I walked away. My hands shake while I type because I can feel exactly what Naomi was describing about his manipulation. He never said anything you could report, but the meaning was perfectly clear. I save the document with a timestamp and back it up to 3 different places, because if he's setting up to discredit me the way he did her, then I need proof of what really happened. 2 weeks pass and Naomi texts me saying the district finally responded to her FERPA request. She sends me a photo of a thick manila envelope with the school district logo. When she opens it, there are printed emails, but some parts are blacked out with notes saying privacy exemption for third-party communications. The redactions are frustrating, but the emails that are included show everything came from the district's own servers. Message after message from Mr. Huang's school account sent to Naomi's student email at times that match her documentation exactly. Several emails were sent by him after 10 at night initiating conversations that had nothing to do with classwork. The headers prove these aren't fake or edited. This is official confirmation from the school's own records that these communications existed exactly as Naomi documented them. I forward everything to Ivy, and she responds saying, "This is important verification." 3 days later, Ivy sends both of us a shared document containing a preliminary timeline. She's combined Naomi's documentation with Mason's emails and the FERPA response, and my corroborating evidence into one organized sequence. The timeline shows patterns across multiple students over multiple years. Ivy highlights gaps where we need more verification, and lists specific questions she wants answered before she can publish anything. She notes which claims have independent confirmation, and which ones still rely on single sources. The document makes everything look less like one student's accusations and more like a real investigation with multiple data points. Reading through it makes my stomach hurt because the pattern is so obvious when you see it all laid out together. I request another meeting with Gabriella Kwan, using the excuse that I need to finalize my college application timeline. When I arrive at her office, she's less warm than last time. She asks how my classes are going, but her tone is more professional than friendly. I mention that I've been thinking about our last conversation and wondering if other students might have concerns about teacher boundaries that they're afraid to bring up. Gabriella's expression changes and she leans back in her chair. She suggests I should focus on my own graduation requirements and college plans rather than getting distracted by complicated situations that don't involve me directly. When I push back gently, saying that student safety seems like something everyone should care about, she interrupts me. She says that making accusations without full information can have unintended consequences for everyone involved, including the people trying to help. The threat isn't even barely hidden anymore. She reminds me that I still need recommendation letters and that my relationship with staff members matters for my future. I thank her for her time and leave feeling sick. That evening, Naomi sends me a voice memo recorded in her car. Her voice sounds tired and flat. She talks about watching former friends literally cross the street when they see her coming and eating lunch alone in her car every single day. She describes the isolation of being treated like a problem by everyone around her. But then her voice gets stronger, and she says that documenting everything gave her back some sense of control when the gaslighting made her doubt her own memory and perception. She says having timestamps and files and proof helped her hold on to reality when everyone was telling her she was crazy. The memo ends with her saying she knows this matters even when it feels completely hopeless. I save the recording because it reminds me why we're doing this. Mason sends me a long email the next day saying he's been thinking about going on record, but he's terrified. He's applying to graduate programs, and one Google search of his name connected to a teacher scandal could destroy his professional future before it starts. We exchange several messages over the next week talking through what a limited statement might look like. Finally, he agrees to provide a signed document describing the basic facts of his interactions with Mr. Huang without using any inflammatory language. He'll confirm the late-night emails and the overly personal conversations and the handwritten note, but he won't make accusations about intent or use words like grooming or inappropriate. It's more limited than I hoped for, but it gives Ivy a second-named source with actual documentary evidence. 2 days later, Celine Benson forwards me a staff-wide email about mandatory training. The subject line says, Student-Teacher Boundaries Refresher Training scheduled for next month. The email body references community concerns without providing any specific details about what those concerns are or who raised them. It's the kind of vague institutional response that acknowledges something happened without actually addressing it directly. But it's also proof that someone in administration knows there's a problem even if they're not willing to name it publicly. Ivy drafts a formal list of questions for the district's public relations office using anonymized examples from all the evidence we've gathered. She asks about their specific policies for after-hours electronic communication between staff and students. She asks about guidelines for private meetings and what documentation is required when teachers meet with students outside regular class time. She asks how they investigate concerns about boundary violations and what steps they take to protect students who report problems. Every question is carefully worded to avoid revealing our sources, but to make it completely clear she has concrete information about specific incidents. The district PR representative responds 3 days later with a statement that could have been copied from a template. She says they take all concerns seriously and have robust policies in place to ensure student safety. She confirms they are currently reviewing concerns raised by community members, but provides absolutely no specifics about what those concerns are or what the review process involves. The response is professionally useless, but it does confirm the district knows they're being watched and that someone is asking detailed questions. Naomi writes another journal entry describing her first formal meeting with the district compliance officer. She felt like she was interrogated rather than supported. The officer kept asking why she didn't report her concerns sooner, which made it sound like the delay made her less believable. He asked whether she'd discussed her concerns with other students in a way that implied she might be coordinating false accusations. He questioned why she had so much documentation, if the interactions felt inappropriate, suggesting that normal victims wouldn't be so organized. Naomi writes that she left the meeting feeling like the investigation was designed to find reasons to dismiss her complaint, rather than to understand what actually happened. Naomi's second compliance meeting got scheduled for the following Tuesday. Ivy called me the night before and explained that Naomi had the right to bring a support person who could take notes and witness the process. I texted Naomi offering to come and she responded within minutes saying yes. The district office building felt cold and official when I arrived. Naomi sat in the waiting area looking tired, her laptop bag clutched against her chest. The compliance officer called us back to a small conference room with a recording device already set up on the table. Then Principal Reed walked in. Nobody had mentioned he would be there. He smiled and said he wanted to offer support during this difficult process. The compliance officer nodded like this was completely normal. Naomi's hands started shaking and I pulled out my phone to take notes. The officer asked Naomi to describe her mental state during the period when she was documenting Mr. Huang's behavior. I typed every word into my notes app while Reed sat there watching us. The officer kept circling back to whether Naomi had discussed her concerns with other students. He wanted to know if anyone had encouraged her to file a complaint. He asked if she understood that making false accusations could have serious consequences. The questions felt designed to scare her into backing down rather than actually investigating what happened. Reed jumped in occasionally to express concern about Naomi's well-being and college prospects. Every time he spoke, Naomi seemed to shrink a little. I wrote down his exact words about being worried she was damaging her own future. The meeting lasted 90 minutes and accomplished nothing except making Naomi feel like she was the one being investigated. We left the building and sat in my car for 20 minutes while Naomi cried. She kept apologizing for dragging me into this mess. I sent my notes to Ivy that evening, and she responded saying the process sounded like textbook intimidation tactics. Meanwhile, Ivy had been digging through the evidence from a different angle. She called me 3 days after the compliance meeting with something new. She had been analyzing the gradebook patterns Naomi documented and noticed that students who had frequent private meetings with Mr. Huang received really strong recommendation letters. Ivy had verified this by checking which students got into competitive colleges and cross-referencing with the meeting logs. The pattern was obvious once you looked at it. She asked if we could get screen recordings showing the exact timing of grade changes compared to meeting dates. Naomi still had access to the grade portal from her community college login. We spent an afternoon recording her screen while she scrolled through archived grade data showing her scores jumping after every private meeting. The timestamps matched perfectly with her calendar entries. Ivy compiled everything into a spreadsheet that made the correlation impossible to ignore. Students who met with Mr. Huang privately saw grade increases. Students who didn't stayed at their normal levels. The evidence was circumstantial, but it established a clear pattern of using grades and recommendations as leverage to get private time with students. Celine reached out to me directly through a careful email that avoided naming anyone specific. She said she had been thinking about our previous conversation regarding teacher boundaries. She had access to lesson plan logs from her role on the curriculum committee. These logs showed that Mr. Huang regularly added something called mentorship blocks to his schedule that weren't part of his official teaching duties. The blocks appeared every semester and they corresponded with specific students each time. Celine sent me anonymized copies with student names removed, but dates and times intact. The logs proved Mr. Huang was systematically creating opportunities for private meetings beyond normal classroom responsibilities. It wasn't proof of misconduct, but it showed intentional pattern of seeking one-on-one time with students. Celine made me promise not to reveal where the documents came from, because she was still untenured and needed good evaluations from administration. I forwarded everything to Ivy with Celine's identity protected. Mason finally signed his statement after weeks of internal debate. The document was carefully worded to describe basic facts without making accusations. He confirmed the late-night emails. He confirmed the overly personal conversations. He confirmed the handwritten note. He didn't use words like grooming or inappropriate. He just stated what happened and when it happened. Ivy now had 2 sources with documentary evidence showing similar patterns of boundary-crossing behavior. The statement gave weight to Naomi's claims because it proved she wasn't the only student who experienced this. Mason made me promise his name would stay confidential until he finished his graduate school applications. I understood his fear, but it frustrated me that self-protection had to come before truth. Still, having his statement meant Ivy could reference multiple corroborating sources without naming them. Ivy drafted a formal follow-up email to the district's communications office. She noted that she had signed statements from multiple sources. She listed specific dates of concerning incidents. She outlined patterns of behavior that violated professional boundaries. She gave them 72 hours to provide comment before publication. The email was professional, but firm. She made it completely clear this wasn't going away, and that she had enough evidence to write a detailed story. I watched her send it and felt my stomach flip. This was the point of no return. Once that email went out, everyone involved would face consequences. 2 days later, I was checking the school website for assignment updates when I noticed something weird. Mr. Huang's name had disappeared from the staff directory. His faculty page was gone. In his place, the schedule just said out on personal leave. There was no announcement to students, no email to parents, no explanation at all. I screenshot the page and sent it to Naomi. She called me immediately, and I could hear the mix of relief and fear in her voice. Relief because he was finally out of the classroom. Fear about what this meant for everyone who had helped her. I felt the same conflicted emotions. Part of me was glad he couldn't hurt anyone else right now. Part of me dreaded what would happen next. The peer backlash started immediately. Rumors spread through school that Naomi and whoever helped her had ruined graduation season. People said we destroyed a beloved teacher over nothing. Someone spray-painted the word liar across Naomi's car in the community college parking lot. She sent me photos of the damage and filed a police report, but we both knew nothing would come of it. I started getting anonymous messages on social media. People called me a traitor. They said I would regret destroying people's futures. One message warned that colleges would find out I was involved in taking down a teacher. Another said my own teachers would never write recommendations for someone who backstabbed the faculty. The messages kept coming for days. I blocked accounts, but new ones appeared. The social cost of speaking up was becoming real and immediate. My favorite English teacher pulled me aside after class on Friday. She had always been supportive, and I'd hoped she would write one of my college recommendation letters. She looked uncomfortable as she suggested I should ask someone else to write my recommendations. She didn't explain why directly, but said it would be better for me to work with someone less connected to recent controversies. The rejection stung, even though I understood she was protecting herself. Teachers were choosing sides, and staying neutral meant staying away from anyone associated with the complaints against Mr. Huang. I walked out of her classroom feeling more alone than I had since this whole thing started. Even people who probably believed us weren't willing to risk their own positions to support us. Naomi filed her formal written complaint with the district that same week. The document was 15 pages long and summarized everything. The boundary violations, the retaliation she experienced after her initial report, the institutional failures that allowed the pattern to continue. Every claim was backed by specific evidence with dates and documentation. She attached copies of emails, screenshots, audio files, and witness statements. The complaint was professional and detailed and impossible to dismiss as the rantings of an unstable student. It created an official record of what happened regardless of what the district chose to do with it. Naomi sent copies to the superintendent, the school board, and the state education department. She kept a copy for herself with a full evidence file in case she needed it later. Filing the complaint felt like planting a flag. We had done everything we could with the power we had. Now it was up to the system to decide whether they would actually address the problem or keep protecting their reputation. Ivy sent me a text 3 days later saying the article was going live that morning. I refreshed the local news site every few minutes until the headline appeared. Pattern of boundary violations raises questions about district oversight. The article never named Mr. Huang or any students, but anyone from our school would recognize the details. Ivy had written it carefully, focusing on policy gaps and how the district handled reports instead of making it sound like gossip. She quoted the compliance officer's vague responses and included data about how many boundary complaints the district received each year compared to how many led to actual consequences. The article made the system look broken without sensationalizing anyone's personal story. Within 2 hours, the link was everywhere. People shared it on the community Facebook groups, the school parent pages, even the local Reddit. I watched the share count climb from dozens to hundreds. Comment sections filled up immediately, and the reactions split down the middle. Half the comments defended Mr. Huang as a dedicated teacher being destroyed by false accusations. People said he went above and beyond for students and that this was what happened when you tried to actually care. Others shared their own stories about teachers who crossed lines and how nobody believed them either. A few comments mentioned specific incidents from years ago that sounded similar to what Naomi experienced. The polarization felt awful, but at least people were talking about it publicly now, instead of pretending everything was fine. My phone buzzed with texts from classmates asking if I knew anything about the article. Some people assumed I was involved because everyone knew I'd been spending time with Naomi. I didn't confirm or deny anything, just said I hoped the district would actually look into their policies. That afternoon, Naomi forwarded me 3 anonymous emails that people had sent to the news site thanking her for speaking up. One was from a former student who graduated 5 years ago. Another was from a parent who said their daughter experienced something similar with a different teacher. The third was from someone currently at our school who said they'd been afraid to report concerns until they saw the article. Reading those messages made me realize how many people had been carrying similar experiences in silence. 2 days after the article published, I got a notification about a new email from the school. Principal Reed had sent a message to all students and parents with the subject line, "Commitment to Student Safety." The email announced new staff training on appropriate boundaries and said the district was bringing in a third party to review their reporting procedures. Reed never mentioned Mr. Huang by name or acknowledged that anything specific had happened. The whole thing read like damage control, carefully worded to sound like the district was being proactive instead of reactive, but it was more action than we'd seen before the article came out. I screenshot the email and sent it to Naomi with a question mark. She replied that it was classic PR move, but at least they were on record now saying they'd make changes. That same day, Mr. Huang posted something on his personal social media. I didn't follow him, but someone sent me a screenshot. The post said something about staying strong during difficult times and not letting false narratives define you. He never directly addressed the allegations or said anything specific about what happened. His supporters flooded the comments with messages of encouragement, calling him an inspiration and saying they stood with him. Other people commented asking why he wouldn't just address the accusations directly if they were false. The vague post let everyone interpret it however they wanted based on what they already believed about him. A week later, Naomi texted asking if I could meet at the coffee shop. When I got there, she looked exhausted in a way that went beyond just being tired. We sat in the back corner and talked quietly about everything that had happened since the article came out. She said part of her felt relief that people were finally discussing it, but another part felt frustrated that nothing concrete had changed yet. I admitted I was struggling with the same thing. We'd done all this work and exposed the pattern, but Mr. Huang was still employed and still had supporters. Naomi said we needed to set some boundaries to protect ourselves because this fight could consume everything if we let it. We agreed to keep checking in, but also to focus on our own lives and futures. The fight wasn't over, but we couldn't let it take over completely. Graduation was 6 weeks away, and I still needed recommendation letters. My English teacher, who'd been quietly supportive throughout everything, agreed to write one for me. She never said anything directly about the situation with Mr. Huang, but I could tell she respected that I'd gotten involved. Getting that letter felt like a small victory because at least one teacher was willing to support me despite the controversy. Naomi finalized her plans to transfer to a 4-year university for next fall. She'd be leaving this community behind and starting fresh somewhere nobody knew about the situation with Mr. Huang. I was happy for her, but also sad that she had to leave to escape it. In mid-May, I heard through Celine that the district had quietly reassigned Mr. Huang to some kind of curriculum development role. He wouldn't have any student contact while they finished their review. The decision wasn't announced publicly, and he was still getting paid. It wasn't the accountability we wanted, but it meant the district thought the concerns were credible enough to remove him from the classroom. Celine told me this in the hallway between classes, speaking quietly so nobody would overhear. She said she was glad he was out of the classroom, but frustrated it took so long and so much effort to make it happen. Around the same time, Naomi got connected with a lawyer through some victims advocacy group. The lawyer worked for free and reviewed all of Naomi's documentation. After going through everything, the lawyer told Naomi she had grounds for a civil complaint against the district and could appeal the disciplinary actions they'd taken against her. The lawyer seemed impressed by how thorough Naomi's evidence was and thought she had a real case if she wanted to pursue it. Naomi was still deciding whether she had the energy for a legal battle, but at least she knew she had options. I spent a weekend writing an essay for the school newspaper about what it felt like to witness injustice and choose whether to speak up. I didn't name anyone or reference specific events, but I described the process of weighing moral obligation against social safety. The essay talked about bystander guilt and the costs of staying silent when you know something is wrong. I submitted it anonymously, and the paper published it the following week. Several students told me privately that the essay resonated with them and made them think about times they'd stayed quiet about things they knew weren't right. The week before graduation, Naomi and I met one last time at the coffee shop. We traded updates about college plans and what the lawyer had said about possible legal action. Naomi still wasn't sure if she'd pursue a lawsuit, but she was keeping all her documentation just in case. I told her about the anonymous essay, and she smiled for the first time in weeks. We both acknowledged that we'd probably never get the clear vindication or perfect justice we wanted. The system was too broken and too invested in protecting itself. But we'd done everything we could with the power we had. We'd documented everything, verified the evidence, gone public, and forced the district to take at least some action. We agreed to keep our files, keep living our lives forward, and keep the door open if opportunities for more action came up later. The fight had changed us both, but we were still standing, and that counted for something. So yeah, that's basically it. Nothing fancy, just a quick story and some good company. Thanks for hanging out. It's always fun sharing stuff like this. Come back next time if you're up for it.